I said this 100 years ago, and I love being right. I just love when I'm right. And I remember telling Indiana University, look, hire Urban Meyer. He's the best coach. I don't care the sport that I've ever seen. And I worked for a great one. I did. I played for a great one, worked for a great one. Urban Meyer certainly proved to be exactly what I said. Urban, nice enough to join us now from a charity event at Muirfield. Hey, boss, this Swamp Kings, I swear to God, now Michael Jordan had an advantage over you because it was during the pandemic, nothing to watch, nothing to do. But this Swamp Kings that's coming out, brother, I swear to you, the interest in this is going to go through the roof, and this is going to be unbelievable, and it's going to rival Jordan. What do you expect out of it?
Well, Michael Jordan has an advantage over all of us, the greatest of all time. But, Tim Tebow, we had the greatest. Yeah, that's right. You held him to 9 points. I remember that story. So
that's right.
Yeah. It's going to be a great show. I've seen all 4 episodes. It's the highs and lows of a great run in college football. It's a celebration of one of the greatest players, I think. I'm biased, but the greatest player ever to play, Tim Tebow. A very talented team that, won 2 championships in 3 years, went, I believe, 13-1, 3 out of 4 years. And just a great group of elite players that took Florida to championships in football. And then I wish they would have done the story where Billy Donovan at the same time was winning basketball in 06 and 07 with that unique, incredible basketball team. Both the University of Florida held both trophies for 3 out of 4 years, which is incredible.
Hey, Urban, a lot of people, I saw the trailer on it, and a couple of things. One, I want to get into this first. You've always told me, like, the practices with that particular group were insane.
Yeah, I grew up in the era where toughness was the key, and I still believe toughness is the key. And so we would practice hard, and a lot of times as a coach, you push your team as far as they'll go. And this team had no end. I mean, we would – there was a story. I'm not sure if it goes in the Swamp Kings story, but one time in spring practice in 2009, Tebow was on offense with the Pouncies. He had Brandon Spikes and Carlos Dunlap and those great players on defense. We had inside drill. That's nothing but a toughness drill. It's about running the ball against stopping the run. And they were chirping and going after each other. This is spring practice. And I had an NFL coach with me. And it was so violent, so intense. After 2 plays, I stopped it. I said, that's enough. I mean, we're going to hurt each other here. We don't need to show any more time. And the coach looked at me and says, I've been in football for 40 years. I've never witnessed anything like that. The talent, the toughness, and the competitive spirit on that team was, in my lifetime, unmatched.
How do you did you have speaking of Billy Donovan, I went down, saw you, and I went and spent some time with Billy when he was in that run, and one of the things that he talked about was managing injury and managing players' time against other players, because he felt like the only thing that could stop that crew was if Joakim Noah got injured or if Al Horford got injured. Your team, toughness, football, you're knocking the hell out of each other. How much did you have to manage the toughness, the going against each other?
Well, you reach a point where it's diminishing return, and that's very obvious. And I had, like any coach, like you were, when you coach, you have 1 or 2 or 3 people you really count on. And mine was my strength coach, Coach Mick Marotti, who was my right-hand man. And, Lou Holtz would always help you. There's 3 types of teams. One team that's overconfident, you need to break them. One team that's lack of confidence, and you need to build them up. And then there's that perfect team. And that's where there's a little bit of arrogance, there's the toughness. And once you get that equilibrium of toughness and of confidence, then you just got to get them ready for the game. And it reached that point of Florida rather quickly. Once we got that thing going, recruited elite players, and there was such a culture of toughness and work ethic in that place that it was diminishing returns. So I was very cautious about that.
You mentioned Tebow. Tebow comes out there. Hell, he's a TV star before he ever gets to you. ESPN's doing a documentary, a behind-the-scenes kind of deal. Was there ever any jealousy because of the popularity of Tebow? And if so, how'd you manage that?
Oh, sure. I think later in his career that started to surface a little bit, and it was something we had to deal with. I mean, the reality is Tim was Tim Tebow, and He didn't bring it upon himself at all, but he was a polarizing figure that we would. When we went to play at Mississippi State, the planes land, and we get in a police escort to the hotel, and we had to stop the buses, and we couldn't get to the hotel because there were thousands of people lined up, and you just had to have security everywhere. There was times where I had, we had Tebow, Percy Harvin, and Brandon Spikes. They all became cult heroes, and I would, we'd put them in a van just to leave the practice field so they could get back and not be bothered. There was times, they couldn't really walk around campus. They couldn't go anywhere because this team became, the players just became bigger than life. And, I can see why. They were great. It was a great team, great players.
But you and I both know that, great teams sometimes don't connect with the fans. Great teams sometimes just, they're popular, but then there had to be something with this particular group. I saw the trailer and guys are like, man, this is incredible. This is big. This is, and the stories that you're telling, there had to be some kind of human element that connected these guys to people.
Yeah, they were a cast of characters. They celebrated, and they had fun on campus, off campus, and that's well documented. We had some issues that we all had to deal with, and that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get involved, because there was a narrative that these guys were bad people. Certainly we had some guys on the team that, went on afterwards and did, one guy in particular did horrific stuff. But during that era, it was a team that, like I said, a cast of characters, but I love those guys. And the fact if someone said they're bad people, I'd fight that, say that's not true. Did we have some issues like a lot of other college teams did? Certainly. But I'll tell you what, that the fans, and that's probably why this show is going to get so much attention. People identified with them. They love these guys, love them as players, and a lot love them as characters.
Yeah, look, I always liked the Florida-Tennessee game, and I'm living in Indiana. Then you become the coach of Florida, so now I'm going to watch Florida. But I remember telling Jackie, my first wife, like, hey, if Urban wasn't the coach, I'd still be watching these dudes every freaking day. If you had the same dudes, right? I mean, because, all right, you mentioned the off-field issues. You show that. I mean, people are saying, well, I'm sure Urban had editorial control. He calmed it down. Answer that, would you, for me?
Yeah, I didn't have any editorial control over anything. I'll tell you what I did, though, is when I was asked to be a part of it, there was, like I said, things said that I wanted to make sure that, I was going to make sure that it didn't become a narrative. And if it did, then I was going to give, and so was Tim, so was Brandon Spike, so was Brandon Sollers, so was Major Wright, so was Odd Mad Black, Dallas Baker. These guys were all leaders on the team. They were in the locker room. They were part of these teams. And sure, there was some stuff that happened that, people made mistakes on those teams, and the mistakes were corrected. The mistakes, unfortunately, received a lot of headline, which, I see Georgia going through some stuff now, and I've seen other teams go through it. And, that's what happens when you're at the top of the mountain.
My first practice at Indiana was the first practice after they won a national championship in basketball. And I'm a freshman. I'll never forget how Coach Knight just killed us. And I wasn't even a part of that, but he wanted to make sure that handling success was something we did. You mentioned Georgia. How hard is it to handle success? Georgia going through a ton of different things, right? You talk about the things you went through. Success is not the easiest thing to handle. Is there a comparison? Do you see a comparison with what Georgia's going through right now?
Oh, sure. I've seen it at all levels. I've had many friends in this business, and I'll never forget when Joe Madden won the 2016 World Series with the Chicago Cubs. And I'm not talking legal because I don't know enough about all that. I just know about handling a team.
Right.
And it's the same people, different team. And that's why the opportunity to repeat is so hard. Both in, what was it, 2008, we had the majority of the team back, and we went 13-1 and just lost that last SEC championship game. In 2014, we won the national championship here at Ohio State, and 15 had a lot of players back. And once again, went 13-1, but it was hard to coach that team. And there's no blame. It's just people change. And, that's why I admire, I think Nick Saban's done a really good job of consistency. I think Kirby Smart's doing a hell of a job right now, but it's only going to get harder. And Lou, once again, I use Lou Holtz quite a bit because he's such a great mentor to me. That climbing a mountain takes energy and togetherness. Once you're atop the mountain, it's nothing but fatigue. I mean, you're getting all arrows pointed at you, and you got to really stick together. You got to really be disciplined because things come your way that we're all human beings and mistakes will happen. And I saw that happen, and we did the very best. I really look back now and say, man, we tried our hardest to make sure we isolated players away from all the outside nonsense. And it's really hard to do.
There's only two perfect people in this world. One of them is the media, and the other is the other team's fans. The other team's fans are perfect because you suck, and our team is great. And, of course, the media, these clowns, have never, ever made a mistake. What do you see? And I guess I'm asking you to have a crystal ball, but it's based on your experience. Is this, how do I put this right? Georgia's going to be really good, but this is a different team for Georgia, right? And Saban doesn't seem to have any issues with this. He just keeps going. Do you see Georgia having a more difficult year because of what's happened?
I just think it's going to be a difficult year because of transition at quarterback. They had the most underrated player in my mind in the last 20 years of college football, and that's Stetson Bennett. You can just say what you want other than he's got a bunch of rings on his finger. And that's, to me, how you measure the success of a quarterback. So they have new quarterback. They have, everything pointed right at him. But I think, all you got to do is, I know Kirby Smart. I actually know his wife. She's great people and friends of ours. And I think he's done a phenomenal job. And he's consistently recruiting at a level that's, only matched by maybe Ohio State and Alabama. So they're still separating themselves from the rest of the SEC. Alabama's an intriguing one as well. Now, also, Georgia, I don't want to undervalue the staff. He lost his offensive coordinator. I just was reading this morning about Tommy Rees going to Alabama. And those are when I struggle. When you lose a great coach, you better replace him with a great or greater coach, or that's what's going to be the fall-off. I think the assistant coaches are the most unsung heroes of any championship run. I go back now and I look at our championship seasons. You look at those assistant coaches I had, they basically all became head coaches, or at least, the majority of them did. So the assistant coaches is something to watch very closely. Nick Saban has done it, and he just keeps, he loses coaches and he keeps going. He loses coaches and keeps going. And that's a credit to his culture because I struggled with that. When I lost assistant coaches, we fell off a little bit at certainly the places where I had to replace them.
What'd you go? 12-2, 14-1. Yeah. I mean, that for you was a struggle. I mean, okay, we lost an assistant. Shit, somebody might be tied with us at halftime. Damn it, we got to figure this. Yeah. We got to figure this out.
The problem is, Dan, we did. I really believe we had enough talent that maybe, you talk about the national championship, and I know that's unfair because there's so much stuff. But you look at the 2009 team and that 2015 team, man, were they good. And, we had coaching transition and we didn't get it. Once again, though, we went 13-1, but there's no room for error.
Yeah. No, I mean, people think that national championships are easy when you're at that certain level. National championships, man, it's impossible. And you were able to do it 3 times. I got to ask you, you watch Seinfeld. And, Jerry's the connecting guy, right? Everybody kind of connects through Jerry. Was there a guy on those teams that you had that maybe people didn't know about was kind of the connecting guy?
Yeah, on Florida, they're going to see him. I mean, he is a type A. He's a guy that, was in his own way an incredible leader. But Brandon Spikes on our team in Florida was just the connector, man. He was a guy, and, of course, he played in the NFL, so people know of him. But you're really going to get to know him in this show, and it's rightfully so. He was a connector, certainly on defense, but as a team as well. As Spikes went, our team went. And then, I'm going to give kudos to Charlie Strong, too. He was my D coordinator in Florida. We don't win the 2 championships without him. We don't. Charlie Strong is one of the best coaches and best people I've ever been around. So that's a connector. The connector at Ohio State, JT Barrett was and he got hurt, but he became such a vocal and behind-the-scenes leader. I'm once again very biased, and I wear my feelings on my sleeve. I think he's one of the greatest players ever to play the game of college football, certainly at Ohio State and certainly in the Big Ten.
Why was Charlie Strong so important to that crew, Urban?
He's tremendous. He just was. So, for example, we have a tight end, Cornelius Ingram, making the decision whether to come back or to go for a senior year. He's a tight end, and he asked to meet with me and Charlie Strong. He didn't ask to meet with a tight end coach. He didn't ask to meet with other people. That's how much people valued his opinion, because Charlie was a guy that, he'd give you a shirt off his back. He'd give honest answers, and he was the guy that was a connector in that locker room and on that staff.
Hey, Urban, how difficult, can you put in perspective how difficult it was, or maybe, for Brian Kelly to come from Notre Dame, Boston guy, Michigan, coached up in Grand Valley, Cincinnati, and all of a sudden he comes to the South. You did the same thing. You came to the South, and Charlie Strong, you got it done at the national championship, a couple of them at Florida. How difficult is that for a guy like Brian Kelly to come into LSU and do what he did?
Well, the one thing about Brian Kelly, he's won at every level. And that's where, I have great admiration from Grand Valley State to Central Michigan to Cincinnati to Notre Dame. He's a winner. I know him well. He's very disciplined about the way his teams play. But I'll also be very honest, when he took the job, I was very skeptical. I was worried because it was a culture shock for me to go from Notre Dame to Bowling Green to Utah to end up in the SEC, because the SEC now the intensity level of every week, of every day, is unmatched anywhere in college football.
Well, last thing before I let you go, and I want to get back to the special that you had. When you were going through the Swamp Kings, 06 to 09, did you just sometimes sit at practice and go, damn, I didn't know players could be this good, or damn, this is pretty amazing, just what these guys physically can do?
I did. In all due respect to other parts of the country, when I stepped foot down in Florida, and my first exposure to the SEC was Tennessee at the Swamp in 2005, and the size of the men and the speed of the collisions, I'd never witnessed anything like that. And then we weren't quite at that level in 05, but by the time we got to 06, 07, 08, 09, I'd look out there at times and say, you got 6 foot, you got these Pouncey twins that are gigantic human beings, are as athletic as, skill players at other places. I have guys like Carlos Dunlap that return. How about this? Carlos Dunlap returned a kickoff in high school for a touchdown. He's a 6'7", 285-pound defensive end. So you're just talking about athleticism, and then the impact, the contact. That's why you just admire that conference. To this day, it's still, I think the Big Ten's getting closer because they're recruiting at a much different level with Ohio State, the Wolverines, and Penn State. You watch them this year, they have SEC talent. But for years, it wasn't even close.
Hey, last thing. If you just used name, image, and likeness for what it was supposed to be, you go to school, you play, somebody wants to put you on a car dealership, or just the name as it was proposed, how much would Tim Tebow have made? How many deals would have come across his desk, your desk, on a daily basis? And how big a distraction could that have been for Tebow?
Well, a quick comment, I made this before, is I think you can fix NIL rather quickly. You get rid of the collectives. That's got to go away. That's the ask donors to start supporting. I hear it all the time now because I'm friends with great donors, and they're like, well, I get asked to donate $100,000 to buy this guy a truck. No, that's not what you're supposed to do. If a car dealership wants to hire, the great player Marvin Harrison, that's fantastic. That's called capitalism. The other thing's called cheating. But to answer your question, you saw the Cam Newtons, the Tim Tebows, the Cardell Jones, the amount of money that those guys could have made, and right money, which I'm a huge fan of. That's what's supposed to happen. It would have been, $10 million a year? And can you imagine the value that was been placed on that? But it would have not been donors. It would have been, because I'll tell you what, you want to have someone sell cars for you? Tim Tebow can. You know,
Right.
you don't want to sell, or some business wants to have Cardell Jones back when he won that championship in 2014. You're darn right he could, but that's the right way to do it. Not what's happening now.
No, I agree. That's why I asked it that specific way, because, I'm sure, other schools would have been bidding for Tebow the way it goes now. But the way it's supposed to be, Tebow would have been, I think, like back in my day, Steve Alford would have been, leading to a national championship. You want to sell a car? Here's your guy, right? I mean, that's the way it was supposed to be, and kids would benefit from it. Let's put it that way.
But not a 17-year-old coming out of high school that has an agent and they're trying to rally up money from boosters to pay a high school player. The stories I'm hearing, Dan, and you hear every coach saying, "My gosh, what are we doing?" Let that 17-year-old go win a national title, become an All-American, and certainly capitalize on his name and likeness. That's called the American way. That's what should happen.
Yeah, no question about it. Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy as hell, but this is going to be a massive, massive thing. It's going to be great, and I can't wait.
Hey, congratulations on your father's golf event too, man. And I knew your dad. I loved your dad and love your family. All the best.